Hi and welcome to pmblounge.com. Today we are looking into requirements traceability metrics. Yeah, the background might remind you of the movie metrics, but then this is a different sort of metrics. This is actually a document, and this is a very useful document. The project manager needs to make sure that this document is prepared and updated at all times and is also available in a central repository which can be accessed by any one of the project teams, so that they need to kind of look into the requirements traceability metrics, which is also known as RTM, to make sure where the requirements are, where they are going, what is their status, and all of this will make more sense when we discuss the requirements traceability metrics in more detail. So let's get started. All right, so we are going to typically answer the basic questions. The number one question is the why. Why requirement traceability metrics? Why is it important? Which is one of the questions we try to answer whenever we cover a new topic. So this is one document which can help you with a high level view of how each requirement ends up in the product of the project. So all the requirements, all the 500 tools and techniques that we have already discussed on and a playlist link to it will be available in the description below. By the way, a detailed article on requirements traceability metrics is also available at pmblounge.com. The link to it will be available in the description. So, as talking about all the tools and techniques that we have already discussed, when you have used all the tools and techniques and you have collected all the requirements, how do they end up from what is their journey, right, from the beginning to coding to design and then to coding, of course, and then to testing and then to finally ending up in the product of the project. This entire journey is traced by the requirements traceability metric. So whatever requirements that you had, how did they end up in the product of the project? That is a high level view which an RTM document can provide. It also makes sure that none of the requirements are lost during the course of the project. And that's the worst thing that can happen, right? You have a certain requirement and it's lost. It's just not met. And the stakeholder who provided that requirement didn't have any means or any view of whether or not that requirement was being pursued. With the requirements traceability metrics, that stakeholder can have that very view and make sure that his or her requirement is being pursued, is being taken care of during the course of the project. Lastly, you can definitely expect questions in the PMP exam on requirements traceability metrics. If there's no direct question on the requirements traceability metrics, make sure you'll make sure the examiner will make sure that RTM does appear as one of the options in some other question where it could be a wrong answer, but then you need to know what RTM is to kind of make sure that it is a wrong answer, right? So if there's no direct question on RTM, it can definitely appear as an incorrect option in some other question. So knowing RTM is definitely going to be helpful. Let's talk about the what. What exactly is the requirements traceability metrics? And we have spoken about it in brief. Let's look into some of the definitions, right? So the RTM, as the name goes, is all about tracing the requirements end to end, like I mentioned earlier. And end to end here means right from the inception, right from when the requirement was suggested by someone, to design, how was it designed, to coding, how was it coded, and to testing, and then finally into user acceptance testing as well, so that they don't get lost during the course of the project, which is what we talked about earlier. So you can see the entire relationship of a requirement and its journey right from inception to user acceptance testing with the help of this document. We are also going to take a look at a sample RTM document, right? So it's not an entire document, but I'll show you how it looks like, and that is going to kind of help you understand the RTM document. And it will also help you in visualizing how the requirement basically travels. So it is a one-stop shop for anyone to look into and understand where the requirements come from, where do they get implemented, and how do they get verified. All of this information at one place. This document is definitely gold. Now, this is the example that I was talking about. So, obviously, for a large project, the requirement IDs themselves will run into thousands. And for smaller projects, it may not be that big, but requirement ID is basically the number given to the requirement, right? So, we are taking a look at 1.1 requirement ID. Now, who requested this? So it was requested by the sponsor. So this is something which you can kind of take note of. And again, do note that this is just an example that we are looking into. It is quite possible that in your organization, the template used for RTM, right, the requirements traceability metrics, could be different in as compared to what we are looking into. So request ID 1.1, requirement ID 1.1, who requested it? It was requested by the sponsor. What was the requirement description? The requirement description was to add the login forms. This is the basic number one requirement. You need to add the login form. Now, design, where does it show up in design? HLD section 1.1. HLD stands for high level design. If your organization has a different name for a design document of the project, that name of the document will show up here. So HLD section 1.1 is where the design for this login form is available. Now let's move on. Coding. So login form.sql is the module where the login form has been coded, right? Now system test case. So test case document, wherever that document, whatever the name of that document is, in that test case 1 to 4 are the test cases which basically tests the login form, right? And then UAT test case. So in the UAT test cases document, test cases 1 to 3 correspond to testing of the login form, right? So did you see how requirements, how one requirement of adding a login form is traveling, right? It was suggested by the sponsor. The description was add the login form. It is mentioned in the high level design document section 1.1. Login form.sql is the coding module. And then finally, these are the test cases that the login form corresponds to. So this is the journey of the requirement login form. And similarly, all the requirements of the project, each and every single requirement of the project will be listed in the RTM document. And of course, it will be a very big document, but then this is a document that is going to make sure that none of the requirements are, you know, are lost, and every single requirement is being met. And what is the corresponding, design element, what is the corresponding coding element, what are the corresponding test cases to each of the requirement. This makes sure that you are not missing out on any of the requirement, and this document makes sure from stakeholders perspective, they can simply search for their requirement and make sure the corresponding elements of design, coding, and test cases are available. So this is why it is extremely important. This document is extremely important. This document is something which is which should definitely be a mandate on each and every single project. Now let's try to understand the when and the how. When do you create it? You should, as per the suggestion is that requirements traceability metrics should be created at the very beginning of the project, as it forms the basis of the project scope and incorporates the specific requirements and deliverables that will be produced, right? So all the requirements, since all the requirements will be available in the requirements traceability metrics, it makes sense that it is created in the very beginning, so all the stakeholders can look into it and make sure that their requirements are listed. So a clear picture of the project scope comes out, and clear picture of the deliverables of the project also comes out. So that is why it is important when you're done collecting requirements is when you should be creating the requirements traceability metrics. And how do you create it? So there are certain software like Quality Center is one of the software that I have personally used in the past that generates the RTM, right? The requirements traceability metrics. And similarly, other different organizations may have their own software to generate RTM, right? So if an organization gives that kind of importance to a requirement traceability matrix, they might have their own software to generate the RTM, and they might have their own software that makes it easier and simpler to generate an RTM. So that is all that we had. This is a good refresher on what requirements traceability metrics is, and this contains all the information that should be helpful in your exam from RTM perspective. Like I said earlier, there is a detailed article available on pmplounge.com, which will be the link to it will be available in the description. You can always check that out. And the related playlists of the scope management knowledge area and collect requirement process is also available in the description. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Check us out on our social media, facebook.com/pmplounge and twitter.com/pmplounge. You can always send your queries if you have any at pmblounge@gmail.com, and feel free to check out the website pmblounge.com, your number one free resource for PMP certification and project management industry information. Thank you.